this video's definitely been a long time coming. Feel free to write Amazon.com, let them know how happy you are about the expedient service to military members stationed overseas. It took them almost a month to get the battery charger for my video camera. On the plus side, you do get to see this awesome Thanksgiving photo. I call it Thanksgiving served raw. Blame the guy in the sunglasses, he likes to do weird photos like this. So anyway, as you know, I did go to the fabulous country of Australia. I stayed in the city of Brisbane, which is apparently pronounced Brisbane and not Brisbane, as I had been calling it. Sort of similar to the way we pronounce the car dealership Nissan, they pronounce it Nissan. One of the smallest differences between America and Australia, as I would come to find out. But anyway, for the geographically impaired, this is where Brisbane is. It's in a state, yes they do have states, called Queensland. I wish I had gotten to take my video camera with me, but my battery charger managed to gloriously vanish right before I was about to leave, so I had no way to power my camera. I bought this $100 digital camera, and while it lacks the power I would have preferred, I think it still manages to do the job. So I'm going to take you through my photos, show you what I did in Brisbane. Sit back, Brisbane. Sit back and enjoy my slideshow, replete with a personal narrative of the event. This is the city of Brisbane. It's a wonderful city at night. It doesn't have a major skyline because the central business district is actually pretty small, but the Brisbane River makes sure that the city covers a pretty large area. I love big cities, and Brisbane is the third largest in Australia. When looking at the city from the top of Mount Cootha, named that way because Cootha is the Aboriginal word for honey, and that's what they used to gather from that hill, I feel a sense of awe at what we, mankind, can do. I think that's why I like big cities so much, because they're a product of man. When I see big cities like Tokyo, Brisbane, or even Indianapolis, I see what other people see when they look at a jungle path. It's a wilderness of its own, with creatures of all shapes and sizes, and it's definitely worth exploring. Here's a view of the city from the hotel I was staying at. I didn't spend much time in that room, but I thoroughly explored the streets around it to the point where I'm pretty sure I knew more about the inner city of Brisbane than most of the Brisbaneites that I hung out with. Visiting Mount Cootha was pretty much the first thing I did when I got there, and that started a chain of events that led to a very busy first week for me. The next couple of days were spent exploring the streets of the city and visiting museums and art galleries. I introduced myself to a lot of random people, but my camera was acting funny, the battery was running out of juice, so I didn't get a lot of pictures that were usable. I also couldn't take pictures in the art gallery because I was too stupid to figure out how to turn off the flash, and I kept getting yelled at. I did manage to catch this image, this photo, of a floating interactive art that was on the floor of the Queensland Gallery of Modern Art. You could actually walk on a pathway through the floating balls and pick them up and touch them and play with them if you wanted to. It's pretty cool. After that was one of the more prominent moments of the trip. It was definitely a big moment for me because I got to visit the Lone Pine Koala Sanctuary and see a bunch of unique Australian animals for the first time. After the Lone Pine Koala Sanctuary, I went to Dreamworld. Dreamworld is basically Australia's answer for the amusement park. Unfortunately, it's a little more kid-oriented than it is teen, young adult-oriented, so there wasn't as much to do as I would have liked, but they did have thrill rides like the Tower of Terror, and they also had the Great Drop, both of which I did, by the way. Wasn't easy. I am a chicken, and I am afraid of heights, so I'm pretty sure my eyes were closed 50% of the time, but I still had some fun. They also had the Claw, which is the one that spins around and then it swings up and down like a pendulum. That one was the most fun of the rides there. I did that one twice. They also have a roller coaster called the Cyclone, which had 2 upside down loops in it. The only reason I mentioned that one is because I think it's funny that the first roller coaster in the States was called the Hurricane. And here's your meteorology lesson for the day, boys and girls. A hurricane is a tropical cyclone that occurs in the western Atlantic, because the word cyclone can be attributed to any storm with circular winds around low atmospheric pressure. That includes tornadoes, also includes hurricanes. And now you know.
Now I know.
And knowing is half the battle.
G.I. Joe!
The next day I climbed one of the Glasshouse Mountains. Glasshouse Mountains were formed by volcanoes 25 million years ago. and pretty much dot the scene of what would otherwise be a pretty flat plain. We climbed Mount Tibrogargan, which is 1,194 feet above sea level. It's the third highest of the Glasshouse Mountains. Glasshouse Mountains were named by Captain James Cook. He thought they looked similar to glass furnaces in England, but I have no idea what he's talking about. I've never seen a glass furnace in England, but unless they're mountain-shaped, I'm pretty sure he was daydreaming or something when he thought of that name. But the names for the individual mountains, Tibrogargan, Birwa, things like that, those are Aboriginal names based on a story surrounding the 5 different mountains and how they interacted or something. I don't know. I'm not telling you the story because I'm too lazy to look it up, and this isn't story time anyway. Well, that was pretty much my first week. The second week I really tried to relax. I didn't do as much. It was a little hard for me to relax. I couldn't watch any television. They didn't have any American football. Didn't even have Monday Night Football, which was Colts vs. Jags at the time, which would have been a great game for me to watch, but no. And I didn't bring my Xbox 360, so I couldn't play that. I started doing things that were a little strange, a little erratic, like, you know, reading and writing. It was just crazy. I did see a movie in an old-fashioned movie theater. That was pretty cool. The movie was called A Mighty Heart. It may be the only movie predominantly starring Angelina Jolie that I've actually enjoyed. The movie itself wasn't as emotional as it probably could have been. It was a little more cut and dry, but I thought that was rather fitting because the movie's actually about 2 traveling journalists. So yada yada yada, vacation marched on, weekend came around again, and I had more plans that weekend that involved visiting some beautiful Australian beaches. The first one we went to was it was something out of a James Bond movie. I honestly felt like Daniel Craig in Casino Royale. The place was called Byron Bay, and it was absolutely surreal. It didn't help that I have a not-so-official tour guide named Laura all this time, who is surreal in her own right. And she brought along her dog Lucy, who was a blast as well, even though after her ride through the water, she promptly chose my seat in the car. After Byron Bay, we went to another beach that I don't have any pictures of, called Lennox Head. This one's not quite out of a movie, but it's nonetheless still quite a picture. They had some people flying some pretty cool kites, some shaped like dolphins and sharks, stuff like that. One guy had a contraption that would actually allow the kite to pull him along on wheels. That was pretty cool. And before the day was out, we would go to the Natural Rockbridge National Park, where thousands of years of water erosion had caused a natural rock bridge to form over the river that the waterfall fell into. It was pretty cool, but by this time it was too dark for my camera to do anything useful. That turned out to not be such a bad thing for me because I got to see the 100 glowworms that had made a home for themselves under the rock formation. And although I spent most of Sunday the day after all that sleeping, it wasn't without good reason. Sunday morning, Laura and I went on a bike ride in a place called Woody Point. It had an incredible view of a bay where there was some more kite flying and some cool jet ski competition. One guy actually was letting the kite pull him along on the water. I don't even know how he was going to get back to the beach. Of course, I forgot sunscreen, and I spent most of the rest of that day rather windburnt and slightly sunburned too. My tour guide and I did hang out one more time before I left. We went and we saw the movie The Kingdom, and subsequently my last real moment in Australia is remembering a bad political statement on film. I really learned a lot on this trip, about Australia and about myself. I really feel like my life changed with this trip, but since I'm doing this video a month afterwards, I can honestly say my life hasn't changed in any significant way. But that's for another video, another time, maybe one I'll make a little bit later, who knows. As it is, I want to leave you with this quote. It's a quote from a book that I read while I was in Australia. It comes from theologian Benjamin Warfield, and it really spoke a lot to me about my life, about the way it's going, and about some of the things I've been reading recently. We must not then, as Christians, assume an attitude of antagonism toward the truths of reason, or the truths of philosophy, or the truths of science, or the truths of history, or the truths of criticism. As children of the light, we must be careful to keep ourselves open to every ray of light. Let us then cultivate an attitude of courage as over against the investigations of the day. None should be more zealous in them than we. None should be more quick to discern the truth in every field, more hospitable to receive it, more loyal to follow it, whithersoever it leads. Chew on that. It's delicious. Goodbye.